Thanks for having me here. Thanks for joining my session, and thanks to Sastok for inviting me. As usual, with other presentations, we are accepting questions through Slido. So if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to put them on Slido, and I'll answer them towards the end when we show them up on the screen. So that's me for the ones that cannot see me at the back. My name is Dimitris. I'm the founder of Transifex. And I'm originally from Greece, hence the weird accent. And I want to talk a little bit about Transifex. Transifex is a software as a service platform that helps companies translate their products in many languages. And it basically helps you turn your website looking all Chinese or all Greek to you, but actually offers a great user experience to your global audience and everything around that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our history so far and kind of provide some context around this presentation. Transifex had a rather different growth compared to other companies or other startups. We started originally as bootstrapped. So I had like $6,000 from my PhD savings and started Transifex, and gradually we grew up to $1 million of revenue just without any external funding. Then we started having a lot of interest from customers like Eventbrite, Dropbox, Pinterest to sell our product. So we decided to raise some money to grow more aggressively. So we raised $7 million from VCs like NEA, from Sand Hill Road, Toba Capital, and a few others. And then we decided to turn profitable again. So we grew, and now we're profitable again. And during this path, I learned a lot of things. I think I'm a whole different person, whole different CEO than before. And I wanted to share some of these things with you guys. So the biggest thing I think that changed during this period, especially when we were not profitable, was today I'm way more thoughtful of what can seriously hurt our company and take us out of business. And I know, like many of the presentations in the conference about growth, is about hitting your huge goals. I think we're not talking enough about, okay, what happens if your market adapts slower to your product than usually. So it's kind of funny, before fundraising and during fundraise, it's all about excitement, it's all about big dreams. When you're in the process, especially towards the end of the 18 months, there's a lot of thinking about, okay, where do we stand versus our goals, the market expectations, the investor expectations. So that's why I think it's kind of important to talk about this. And just like the guys at Basecamp are saying, today our top business is actually to stay in business. And it's kind of interesting because if you really want to become a billion-dollar company, you really should not die when you are at 1 million or 10 million ARR, right? It's kind of obvious, but if you think about it, these companies, or some of the billion-dollar companies, some of them have multiple founders, some of them have one founder, some of them had a difficult market, some of them not. But all of them didn't die when they were at $1 million. So if you really want to get to that stage, the top thing that you have to do is not die. And I think it's particularly specific to startups because by definition, startups take a lot of risks. You cannot grow your company without aggressively investing, right? And everything in a company that has the type of a startup company is about challenging what's the standard operating procedures out there. I mean, first and foremost, you challenge your market, right? You're disrupting a market that probably has Goliaths out there fully established, right? So it's not easy, and you have to take risks to do that. Also, founders defy a lot of things that are pulling them back, including their own selves, their own beliefs, their parents very frequently, some of the team members sometimes. And also, you go and hire the absolute best people in the market that are as ambitious as you. So your own team is propelling you to get bigger and to try more things and experiment more. So it's kind of natural that the evolution of startups is actually pushing us to the limit and sometimes to the breaking point. A good analogy I like to use with startups is professional athletes. This is Adam Ondra, one of the, probably the best rock climber right now in the world. And with professional athletes, what's usually happening is that, of course, they're pushing themselves to the limits, and they're training extremely hard to bring results in the future. They also have sponsors, just like startups, to help them go through the process of growth. Now, I have a friend that is a professional athlete, and he was telling me that there are 2 rules in training. One of them is obviously train hard. You cannot win an Olympic medal if you don't train really, really hard day in and day out and go through the process of pushing your mind and your body, right? But that was actually the number 2 rule that he told me. The number 1 was actually to prevent injury. Because being an athlete and having a coach, everything will push you, just like startups, forward to try and hurt yourself. In fact, growth is, you need to burn some muscle in order to become stronger, right? So it's very interesting. Now, I think that this analogy works really well with athletes. And there's a lot of thought process in athleticism about protecting yourself. Really good athletes know where to not put themselves into a position where they're going to seriously hurt themselves, and the same with their coaches and everything, right? Because if you take a really bad fall when you're a rock climber, you might hurt yourself, you might hurt your career, you might hurt your championship, you might lose sponsors, of course you might lose your life, right? If you are a Formula 1 athlete, you have to push yourself to take the apex of the curve as fast as possible. However, if you crash your car, you might lose the whole championship, right? So while these kind of limits work really well and are applied a lot in athleticism, I think they're not applied enough with startups. And I think we're not publicly talking about this, but actually founders, when they go and meet, they actually talk a lot about this, right? When you're fundraising, you're not talking about what happens if we don't achieve our goals. However, at least based on my meetings with other founders that I'm working with, or some of my advisors, we talk constantly about, okay, what if this bet does not pay off? What happens then? What will be the position of the company? How much control do you have of the company when you get at that point? Of course, there's a lot about cash flow in this point and how much you're spending and things like that. There's also other things, though, like you hire this person, right? And you expect them to perform really well, for example, a VP of sales or a VP of marketing. So when is the right time to evaluate whether it's the right person for you? If you delay it too much and it's not the right person, you might lose 6 months of stuff, or a VP of product or whatever, right? So small things that are happening during the period of the investment in a company might have a very big impact in the future. And again, I don't think that we're speaking about this often enough. So why do companies fail? Why do startups fail? Well, CB Insights has, this questionnaire. There's a lot of things up there. No market need, run out of cash, not the right team, pricing, poor product. There's so many reasons, right? I want to focus on the second one, the running out of cash. And the reason that I want to focus on this is because I think that startups, it's all about solving problems. So if you have enough time, eventually you can solve the problem. Last year, the founder of Segment actually was Peter Reinhardt, was here in the conference, and he told us about how Segment took 3 whole years to figure out their product market fit. 3 whole years. Now we know about Segment, it's all nice and fully successful, growing like crazy, having raised very good rounds from very impressive VCs, but actually it took them 3 years. And for companies like these ones, like ours, basically, money is time. So if you have the cash flow to buy time, you can solve a lot of the problems that we see here, as long as you have the effort, right, and the energy. So you can pivot, you can find the right team and all these kind of things. I think that getting out competed is one of these things that time doesn't buy you. In fact, it's a problem, it's a liability. But my personal opinion is that it's way overrated. I think most companies have time to iterate over and over until they find the right thing. And very rarely, very few companies if we're being honest about ourselves, very, very few companies and very, very few markets have this huge boom where the first player wins everything. We talk often about this, but I am doubting it personally. Very few companies are like that, and even with big data, there's so many companies that were successful back then, even though a lot of people thought that it's a winner-takes-it-all market. Look at Uber and Lyft and things like that. So some companies actually did this very, very well. They grew organically, or they raised very little funding to become successful. All of these guys either haven't raised any money or raised very, very little, right? And take Atlassian, for example. It took them like 7 years to build a successful product. But then, you know, today they're one of the most successful companies out there, right? They haven't raised any money until they became big. And even the round that they raised was just to give some relief to the founders and some employees. They didn't really use the funding to grow. So the thing is that some of these industries, I think, needed just some more time from the team to figure it out properly. So this is kind of important for companies of our type and fundraising, because a lot of the business plans and the operating goals that the team has is set in stone during fundraise. You go and meet with investors and you set up a plan and you get your whole team aligned behind the plan when you fundraise. And you kind of commit to that plan. Of course, you can change it afterwards, and if it's right to change it, the board will fully support it. But you raise money for a reason, and you commit to your investors, and the investors join your board, and you guys start in this journey with a particular goal and a particular roadmap in mind. So the problem, though, is that many times I feel that there's a lot of wishful thinking during the fundraise, from all sides, from the entrepreneurs, from the investors, from everywhere. And that's because it's tough. You're trying to solve a very big problem. First and foremost, you need to believe that you can solve it. And kind of troubling yourself with what-ifs feels almost like a luxury and something that is pulling you back. I think that wise investors and wise founders actually are able to hold at the same time in their mind both scenarios. What if things go really well, and what if things do not go really well? What if I'm not the next Uber? That doesn't mean I shouldn't raise. We should raise and we should try to achieve the goal, but what happens if we don't? If the market moves a little bit slower than what we think? What happens if we really cannot absorb the people as fast? Like, we try to do it, and then it just doesn't happen. Do we have the KPIs in place and the timing to evaluate those KPIs to take a very big decision? Will I really be able to hire the best VP of marketing of my company in 4 months? Like, really, look yourself in the eye, or look your board in the eyes and ask yourselves, will I be able to hire my best VP of marketing in 3 months? Or will I hire the best I can find in 3 months instead of the best of my company? So if you delay, a lot of things might delay, because obviously marketing is compounding, and it's an investment that takes the results show in the future. In the end, you have to be honest that there is a non-zero chance that things will not go as well as you think, right? And with Transifex, it happened. The market moved more slowly than we thought. There's still like a very big following of the customers, like, are very, very much aligned with the translation agencies who are offering the services. And it's kind of slower to disrupt, so it needs some more time. But you have to be honest. And if this happens, you should make sure that you have backup plans and you're able to slow things down, or at least get some more runway to land safely, or just continue flying on your own until you figure it out. So I want to offer like some practical advice on how this can be done. This is how Transifex will raise in the future if we raise again, if we ever want to raise again. And this is what I'm saying with to other entrepreneurs as well. Raise enough money to get to profitability if you have to get to profitability, okay? I know this is kind of, for some people, like maybe too extreme, and some investors will hate it. I don't think so. I think investors love when companies have full control over their destiny, Because if things don't go according to plan, let's say the market changes, your market changes or does not move fast enough. Let's say that the investor market changes, and we've noticed that the last few years. Investors hate it when they are the only ones that have to bail out a company and support it to go forward if new investors do not come in. And it puts a lot of pressure to your existing investors if you don't have if you cannot kind of go on your own and figure things out on your own or find help from somewhere else. So people talk a lot about optionality around having a lot of options to fund your company. I want to also kind of make people realize that there's a lot of optionality also, not just to where to find money, but also how to spend the money more efficiently. So this is a classic fundraising scenarios, I guess, right? You have the standard scenario that you spend X and then you bring so much revenue, and in the end, you are at the position where you need to raise your next round. Very, very classic. Maybe it's 6 months or something like that runway. And we often have an aggressive scenario, which is if things go well, we're going to spend a little bit more aggressively, and the next round will be probably even better. And if the revenues are conservative, we can also cut down a little bit on expenses, and then we'll figure it out. The problem is that the conservative scenario, again, puts the company in a very, very bad position, like very, very bad. The bridge round that you might raise will not be good, and investors should be honest that the bridge round will not be good. And who knows what other changes might need to happen in a company. So my recommendation, like my very honest and direct suggestion, is to actually aim at hitting your aggressive scenario in terms of revenue and actually do it by spending according to the conservative scenario. Now, that's super tough. It requires a ton more work before fundraising, before setting up the plan, like tremendous amount of more work, because you need to gain confidence about all these questions and know inside out that you can actually do it and do it better than the original plan. So you need to be so convinced that you can bring the extra revenue, the more additional revenue, but actually do it with less expenses. So this requires a ton more confidence from the founder, from the team, from the investment team. But if you're able to do that, here's what will happen. At the end of the 18 months, the company might have quite some money in the bank to be able to raise at its own pace. Maybe we will raise then, maybe we'll raise in 6 months. That's a very, very strong position of the company. In addition, if you're actually able to hit the additional revenue, the more aggressive revenue, you can choose to spend a little bit more aggressively. That's another added benefit. But in the end, if you aim at 120 and anything happens in the market, you will be able to kind of absorb some of this. And even if you come lower in revenue, because your plan was always to actually spend only 70, the company ends up with having enough runway at the end to be able to either get it profitable or close a small bridge round to get it profitable, or delay a little bit more the next funding event. So in the end, it's all about creating runway optionality, and this is something that we're not talking too much. We usually talk about cash optionality or investor optionality. I think companies need to have runway optionality, and the companies that are able to do that put themselves in a very, very powerful position, and in the end, they just stay alive no matter what, or basically, they have much, much, much less chances to actually die in the process. So it's all about actually staying alive and keeping your company alive. Thank you. So we have a few minutes to take a couple of questions. Feel free to send them over at Slido. So let's go to the first one. Did you experience any growth bumps while increasing your ARR, and what is your current ARR? So actually, we didn't have like any growth bumps. I mean, every now and then we release a new product. Sometimes some quarters are good because Transifex has enterprise accounts. There are some quarters that are better than others, much better than others actually. But overall, I mean, our growth rate is kind of steady. So right now we're at around 5 million ARR, up and down. I don't want to give a specific answer to that. since we're a private company. But yeah, like the growth rate has been okay. It hasn't been something that every investor will love. However, being profitable gives us enough time to figure that out. The next question, how come 42% of the failed projects are because of no market need? Do you have any tips on how to avoid this? I think trying a lot of things fast and iterating very fast helps you a lot with this. If you talk to your customers very, very early and you just ask them openly, what are your problems? They are going to be open about it, and you can actually answer that. My first role, role other than the CEO, was the first salesperson of the company, and then kind of semi-lead the sales team. So talking a lot with customers was something that helped us figure out exactly what the customers need. So if you talk to your customers a lot, if you have like a bigger audience, surveys and things like that, help tremendously with understanding the customers and the market needs. So talk to your customers to understand the market need. I think that's the best suggestion. All right, our time is up. Thanks very much. If you have any questions, find me after the event.